Welcome in to the Big Hitters Only podcast, episode 1. We're kicking it off here. We have Mike Hardison, Julian Council. I'm your host, Ross Martin. This is the first episode. This is the first time we're doing this. Big Hitters Only. Don't ask about the name. It doesn't mean anything. This is going to be a UNC-centric podcast. UNC stuff gets you in the door. The humor, the discussion, the takes, the off-topic stuff has you staying. I covered the Tar Heels for 10 years, 8 of them in Chapel Hill. I live in Greensboro, North Carolina now. Just moved back from Ann Arbor in the middle of a move. New house here in Greensboro. It is Monday. We're recording Monday, August 19th at 7:02. Bring on my two co-hosts here. Mike, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, y'all. Michael Hardison. I just spent 10 years in the Navy, UNC graduate from 2014. Excited to be here.
And I am Julian Council, not a North Carolina graduate, but a native of Charlotte, North Carolina. My parents both went to Carolina. My family, you may have heard of a restaurant that recently closed, Mama Dips. I was there for 48 years. So that's been my tie to Chapel Hill, my dad's side of the family. He grew up there. All of his siblings worked at the restaurant for a number of years. So grew up going to Carolina football games, going to basketball games, baseball. Just been a big Carolina sicko all of my life. But here locally in Charlotte, covering the Carolina Panthers with Locked On Podcast Network and working over at NASCAR as well. So I guess a professional sports broadcaster hack, so to say.
There we go. Yeah, and guys, this is going to be a rotating cast of characters. We're going to have Mike and Julian on a bunch, along with some other people throughout the year. Try to do 2 or 3 podcasts a week. It's going to be all Tar Heels and with off-topic stuff. And we're going to get right into it. UNC Football, 2024 season, a weird year. Is this year 6 for Mac now? Yeah, year 6.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a QB. It's no more Sam Howell. It's no more Drake May. Not sure there's an NFL quarterback on the roster. That's where the discussion kind of starts. I am a little bit, having not covered the team in the offseason the last 2 years, I'm less knowledgeable on this team, and it's great to say as a host of a podcast about UNC. I'm less knowledgeable about this team and less locked in than ever. But, still really getting into it. And I want to get you those initial thoughts. Julian, entering this season, 2024 season, I mean, I would say it's like kind of like a wait and see on Mac and where this year's going to go. What's your kind of initial takes? We'll get into it from there.
Yeah, it depends on where you're at with Mac Brown. I feel like a lot of people after 5 years, they're not over the 9-1 to 9-5 collapse at the end of 2022 season. When you have Drake May, there's all the Heisman talk. There's talk about being in the playoff, and then they lay an egg against Georgia Tech. They lose to State in double overtime. They get just dog walked by Clemson in the ACC title game. And then Oregon, great bowl game they could have won, but they lost that. Last year, ton of expectation with Drake coming back, a lot of Heisman talk again. Also knew he was going to be one of the top picks in the draft. The defense, the hope was that Gene Chizik, back again, wasn't going to have a bad defense again. The defense was improved, but we were all led astray from that week 1 performance against the South Carolina team where their offensive line was just in shambles all year long. The 9 sacks, 16 tackles for loss, that was never going to be something that was going to consistently happen, but to not be able to even replicate even a third of that on a consistent basis the rest of the way was certainly disappointing, and it has a lot of people out on Mac Brown after yet again laying an egg against Virginia, against Georgia Tech. It's hard to kind of see where the program's going, where recruiting from just a standpoint of 4 stars, 5 stars has dropped off. Now, if you look at 24/7 and just at the averages, which I always encourage people to do anyways, their class that you've brought in this year is like 22nd in college football. But that's not what they were used to when you're bringing in 3 straight top 15 classes, 1 class that actually was tops in the ACC, and these are the results. You have 2 NFL quarterbacks, and you're not able to win the league and not able to win 10 games. So, yeah, the vibes aren't the best, but there seems to be encouragement coming out of that building. But fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, well, can't get fooled again.
It's like the first year without a quarterback. What's Matt going to do? I think that's kind of like how I look at it. Like, you don't have the guy to win you games now. It's going to have to be carried by some other person or some other unit. Obviously, a change of defensive coordinator. Mike, what are your initial thoughts heading into this? What are you thinking about right now? 10 days, 8 days from the Thursday night matchup at Minnesota?
In a weird way, it's calming. I feel like for the last several seasons, it's been kind of like Charlie Brown the football. Every offseason we get pretty excited, we're getting pretty hyped up.
Yeah,
we get going off to a great start, and then we collapse down the stretch. And it feels very weird, kind of coming off the end of the Drake May era right after the end of the Sam Howell era. And really, what do we have to show for it? A couple, we have an Orange Bowl appearance, and then we have a couple 8, 9 win seasons.
Which isn't nothing to go to the
It's
Orange
not
Bowl, by the way.
nothing. It's not nothing. It was a
COVID
weird
year, right?
season. Well, yeah, and getting someone in the college football playoff kind of helped us there. Um, it just feels, but I also wonder, like, is that potentially good for this team? We've seen what this team does when they have high expectations, when the spotlight's on them. We have to wonder, what does that look like when, going down the line, no one really expects much out of them. We don't have that stud at quarterback, but it does seem like the talent level in the building's still there. I'm hoping that a better defensive staff might be able to get more out of this defensive line, more out of the linebacker core that we've always been promised. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like, for me, until I see the results actually happen, I'm not really a believer. And so, I don't really have high expectations coming into this year, in a way that takes a lot of the pressure off, I feel like, in terms of excitement. Like you said, it just kind of feels like we're coming into it not really locked into it so far. So I'll be excited to see what happens in the Minnesota game. Honestly, that's going to set the tenor for me. If we come out and we look, efficient, if we look like we might be able to string together some wins, the schedule opens up for us in the middle of the
Yeah.
year. So I don't think there's any way you can say this team, offensively at least, is as good as last year. But it might be one of those things where if they just get on a roll early, maybe they can kind of keep it together going a little bit longer, sneaking under the radar a little bit longer.
Yeah,
I
are
find it
y'all
so
locked-
interesting.
Go
Like
ahead.
I'm locked in. Like I certainly am. Like, and I've always loved Carolina football. Like I can't quit this program as much as I would like to. And like going into this year, this is probably like the least excited I've been about a season since 2018. And we know that 2018 season was the last of Larry Fedora and was not ideal. And it could be the same way this year. This could be the last season for Mac Brown. And plenty of schools are going to negatively recruit and say that it is going to be. I just think that the quarterback thing is a little overblown here in Carolina. Like we have seen that Sam Howell's put up record numbers, Drake May has put up record numbers, and they haven't had that much success in terms of actually getting to 10 games. Yes, they went to ACC title game. That's great for them to be able to do that final year of the Coastal. Yes, they went to an Orange Bowl, and as Mike alluded to, they kind of backdoored their way into it because of Notre Dame being an ACC that season in 2020. But it's not just about the quarterback. Look at LSU last year with Jaden Daniels, Heisman Trophy winner. How good of a team were they? One of the worst defenses in college football. Caleb Williams won the Heisman Trophy the year prior back at USC last year, and that was a 7-5 football team. Like you look at the top 3 picks in the draft, it's not like they played on the best teams last year because they didn't play on complete teams. So I look at this team that's coming this season, it feels like they could be deeper than they've been in the past. I do have some serious questions about offensive line, more so than they have at quarterback. They brought in a bunch of transfers. You got a tackle, your left tackle from North Texas, played in 4 games and was never a starter at the G5 level. Like that's more concerning to me than Max Johnson, who has shown that he can play efficient football in the SEC. Mind you, that was in 2021, but even last year at A&M, it wasn't like there was that significant a drop off from him and Connor Wegman once Wegman went down at A&M. So I'm not all that concerned about quarterback. My concerns offensively would solely lie on the offensive line, where I just don't believe in a portal era, especially North Carolina. It's not like they're going out there and they're buying someone's left tackle like Ole Miss did here. They're going out and getting D3 guys, dudes that didn't play in the G5. Like that's what they're trying to do. That concerns me more than Max Johnson or Connor Harrell or Jacoby Criswell's ability to operate Chip Lindsey's offense.
Dude,
In addition to that,
Can
in
you
addition
tell
to
that
that-
Julian's a pro at this? I mean, Julian's
yeah,
a
I know
pro.
he's excellent.
Dude, I mean, get him on the payroll. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, no, I think Julian's point about the offensive line is the key point here, right? What's been Max Johnson's struggle throughout his career has been staying healthy. If we have a kind of a piecemeal offensive line here put together, and Max Johnson gets injured early on, then we're just Connor Harrell and Michael Merdinger, and we're riding with that for the rest of the season. So yeah, I definitely buy the point about the offensive line. I don't think Max Johnson has to be amazing. I think at this point we are on agreement. He's kind of established himself as the starter. It seems like from the vibes that have been coming out of practices. So just kind of assuming that he ends up the starter. I don't think he has to be, Drake May elite. I don't think he has to be Sam Howell elite. I think he just has to be decent. So I agree with you. I just don't trust the offensive line. I think it will be very interesting to see what Omarion Hampton does behind that offensive line as well, and if he can kind of mask maybe some of the issues.
So I think it leads to a great conversation. Like, what is the identity of this team? And I think we have an average quarterback, but I think we have 3 average ACC to upper ACC quarterback. We have 3 UNC has 3 Power 5 starters. I think Connor Harrell could probably start someplace else. And then Jacoby Criswell. So it's average quarterback play. And if one goes out, you can bring in someone who you think can kind of at least do the job. So it comes back to offensive line, which there's so many unknowns there. I just don't know what to think. There's some big bodies, Trayvon Green, some of the transfers who I was looking at the roster. I was like, dude, I don't know these names. And then, we have one of the best running backs in the country. Amarian Hampton, behind him, Darwin Bartow. That's gonna be the strength. Do we just run the ball? Is it just ground and pound? Do teams stack the box against us? I don't think we have a playmaker. I don't think UNC. I keep saying we. I've been so checked out. I gotta say UNC. I don't think UNC. I don't think there's a playmaker, a go-to NFL caliber wide receiver on the roster that has established himself as that in a UNC jersey. There may be some guys that could get there. There's a lot of guys, but I don't think JJ Jones, really moves the meter. Kobe Paysar coming back from injury. I don't know if the strength is at wide receiver like it's been in the past with the Josh Downs and Antoine Green. So it's going to be relying on the run game, but you're going to I think there's enough bodies at wide receiver. And I like some of those names, especially at tight end too, that they can help Max Johnson. I just don't know if they have someone who can just take the top off of defense or always get open like Josh Downs did or Tez Walker did last year.
They didn't have it last season.
Yeah,
you talk about. You talk about a guy who got open all the time. Like Josh Downs was fantastic for this team back in 2022, and even prior to that in 21, and then that one bowl appearance in the Orange Bowl against A&M. But it's not like they really had that consistent guy last year. Like Tez Walker was outstanding in that game against Miami. Was great against Virginia. And then, where was he against Clemson? Where was he in large parts of that game against Georgia Tech? Where was he against NC State? It's not like Tez was consistently there once he came back. And I understand he missed a lot of time because of the NCAA stuff. They didn't have him in with the first team during camp. But they didn't really have that last year. And I still felt like it was an overall good receiver room. JJ Jones.
Who was quarterback last year?
It was Drake May, but JJ Jones still led the team in receptions and yards last season with Tez Walker out there. Nate McCollum was banged up, I think healthier this year. He can still be a great player for them, as we saw what he did against Minnesota a year ago. Paysor, I think that was the biggest loss for this team offensively a season ago when he went down. I remember seeing Mina Kimes, who I think is excellent in her NFL coverage. She talked about how Carolina and Drake May missed Josh Downs. No. He missed Kobe Paysor, his former roommate and the guy that he leaned on whenever Downs wasn't there. Because you go back to 2022, Georgia State, Notre Dame, App State, Kobe Paysor was the guy he leaned on. South Carolina game last year, same kind of case. So not having him, I think that they've recruited so well at wide receiver. I'm not overly concerned about this position. Chris Culliver, Christian Hamilton are some young guys who are sophomores that can be big-time players for them this season. Jordan Shipp, Alex Taylor, I don't know how much I'm expecting out of them. I know there's a lot of talk about Shipp potentially, but that's a lot to expect. North Carolina, historically, since Max come back, they just don't play their freshman receivers, even if they're talented. You look at a guy like KC Concepcion at NC State. He was between Carolina and State. He wasn't going to play here last year. So I understand why he would want to go to Raleigh. So we'll see if that changes, but I'm not concerned about receiver. I'm not concerned about tight end. I'm not concerned about running back. I'm concerned about the offensive line more than anything on that offense. And Hampton, I think that's what they want their identity to be, running downhill with Amari and Hampton. David Hale, ESPN had a great stat I saw earlier today where he ran for 1,100 yards last season after contact. That was the most in FBS and nearly 200 yards more than any other player in Power 5. So it's not like he had a good offensive line last season and he had success. My concern is more in the pass protection more than it is their ability to get downhill and run the football.
I agree with that. I think I will counter that a little bit. I think Barlow's going to get a lot more carries than we think. I think he's going to kind of eat into Armarian's touches, to be frank.
I can see that.
And that's probably a good thing for mid-season, end of season.
I think the tight end room is worth spotlighting here. I mean, I think we have one of the best tight end rooms in the ACC, period, bar none. We've got John Copenhaver coming off of a pretty solid season. We have Bryson Nesbitt that I think is a stud, and you could probably put him out to the kind of a hybrid tight end wide receiver position that we've seen kind of done in the NFL. I also think that when Jake Johnson gets going, that brother connection will be great. I know he's banged up early season, so I'll be wondering when he can get going. But you're going to have weapons. I mean, I don't think there's NFL talent really among them. Maybe Nesbitt, depending upon how he does this season. But you're going to have weapons. You're going to have weapons at running back. You're going to have weapons at wide receiver. You're going to have weapons at tight end. We've talked about ad nauseum quarterback. Average, slightly above average, maybe. And then the offensive line, that's the issue. So
Yeah.
So let's move on here. Quarterback. Are we concerned about quarterback? Where do y'all kind of enter this conversation? And I think it is going to be Max. Kind of confirm that today with someone on the beat. I mean, are you at all concerned about that? Are you entering I'm concerned about quarterback. What do you think?
You look at Bo Nix when he was at Auburn. That was a 5-star prospect, which means he's going to potentially be an All-American, a first-team All-Conference player. And Bo Nix went to Oregon and lit it up after struggling in the SEC. Max Johnson played at LSU, had a pretty damn good season, 21, transferred A&M, was okay the last 2 years when he's gotten opportunities. Now he's coming to the ACC. You've seen who Carolina's playing this year, and you've seen just a lack of talent compared to the SEC depth-wise in the secondary, especially on the defensive line. Like, that's a big – if you're A&M, you have offensive line injuries, which they've had the last couple of years, and you're going up against Alabama, you're going to get Georgia, you're going up against LSU, and some of these nasty defensive lines, like, you're going to have a problem. Like, as concerned I am about the offensive line here in Carolina, like, they're not going to face those kind of monsters outside of when they play Florida State. So I think Max Johnson can have – I'm not saying he's going to do what Bo Nix did at Oregon, but I'm expecting him to look night and day than what he looked over the last couple of years when he was playing at A&M and the SEC West.
It's super important to highlight this point, too. Do you guys want to take a guess when Carolina plays a team that's preseason rated above it in the F+ or the ESPN rankings at all?
It's got to be like week 9 against Florida State.
Yep, bingo. November. So they're not going to be playing that level of competition that Max Johnson's had to deal with at LSU and Texas A&M. And to be frank, like, they need to take advantage of that. So am I comfortable with Max Johnson at quarterback? To all the points that Julian alluded to, I don't have an issue with it. I think if we are super concerned about him, if that's the kind of pivotal piece, and whether this team is solid, great, or excellent, then we're probably having a good conversation, because it means everything else is kind of gelling.
Yeah. And you got to like the experience. Like, you got to like that experience. Like, that's better than having a freshman come in or a redshirt freshman. You got to like, if he does go out, you can trust Jacoby to come in, or Connor Harrell. So there is some insurance behind it. It was smart to bring in Jacoby. It's good to have 3 quarterbacks who can go. All right, let's move on to defense. I mean, front page of all of our favorite websites. My former employee is a Des Evans story. The hype is there. I'm buying into the 6'6" edge rushers. Travis
this
Shaw
time it's going to happen.
You got the 2 NFL corners. You got 2 under 6 foot linebackers. But the big thing here is the new defensive coordinator, Jeff Collins. Where y'all stand with Jeff Collins? What's going to be different? What's going to change? Are you buying the hype? It's still kind of, you have to prove it on the field. For me, I'm a little concerned about the interior of the defensive line. I think it's really good that UNC brought in Josh Harris. He adds a huge body that can relieve a Travis Shaw or another big man in the middle. Excited about Des Evans in year 5. Excited about Bo Atkinson. And I think the defensive secondary is the best we've seen under Mac Brown.
But looking at this defense, like Jeff Collins, I think it's a good hire. The last time you saw him, you're seeing the 404 hats, the Waffle House, and just all the marketing that they did at Georgia Tech when they moved over from the triple option to back just playing, normal football here in 2021 or in the 21st century. And a lot got lost there as far as how good of a coach he is defensively. He couldn't get it together offensively there with Jeff Sims as his quarterback, and even defensively they had some of their issues. And you look at Georgia Tech now, what's been left over haven't been great defensively. I think here in Carolina, got more talent. Like, you look at that defensive line, like, there were concerns about the interior, but there's still blue chips all over the roster. Like, Des Evans was a 5-star. Bo Atkinson was a 4-star. Jacoby Cowan, who originally started at Ohio State, 4-star. Javari Ritzie, 4-star. Travis Shaw, as we know, 5-star. You got Josh Harris, who's a 4-star when he went to NC State before going to Ole Miss, now here in Chapel Hill. Joel Starlings, 4-star. I mean, Kamen Rucker's the best of these guys, and he was a 3-star player. J. Ron Harvey, Tyler Thompson, Malachi Hamrick, some other rush linebackers, all 4-stars. What is that, 9, 10 blue chips that are in this room? Like, on the outside, I'm not concerned about the edge rushing at all. Like, Atkinson's going to be in there more than Des Evans is going to be this season. You're going to have him and Kamen Rucker on both sides playing meet me at the quarterback. My concern's about the interior. If they can't stop the run, which has been a problem here, it feels like for the past decade in Chapel Hill, they cannot stop the run. If Travis Shaw doesn't finally step up and they don't get something from maybe some younger guys like Rodney Laura, there's been some good talk about him and Joel Starlings, and then get some veterans like Hester to step up, because he hasn't been that great. And Josh Harris really hasn't been all that great when he was at State and then last year at Ole Miss. Important to get an experienced big body, but it's not like he's been a difference maker. They need someone to be a difference maker, and really, they need two of these guys to find out to be difference makers this season. I'd love for it to be Travis Shaw, but it has to be Jahvaree Ritzie, and then someone else has to step up and help him. They're going to be great on the edge. I just don't know how good they're going to be on the interior, and that's really what's the difference between being a conference title contending kind of defense and being just so and not being able to get off the field and having to get tired like they have over the last couple of seasons. But they sound like they want to play more guys, which you have to do. And that's something certainly that Gene Chizik never did. And I never understood why Mac Brown didn't say, Gene, play more guys.
I think the Jeff Collins hire is interesting in a vacuum. I think what's more intriguing is Ted Monchino, coaching the DL up. I think it's interesting that you maybe not have some of the coordinators that have been thorns in the side. No reason to name names. We all know who we're talking about. But I will be interested to see, hey, now we have full control given to Charlton Moore under the defensive backs. Now we have Ted Monchino, who's got the NFL experience coaching up the DL. Do they add more than maybe even just a defensive coordinator hire? I think Jeff Collins brings a lot of energy. There are a lot of Georgia Tech fans I know up here in Charlottesville. None of them are super high on him. I'll be interested to see what happens when he's just a defensive coordinator. He doesn't have to deal with that transition from a gimmick offense into the new era. I think the pressure's off him in a lot of ways. It's not like he can do much worse than Gene Chizik did the last 2 seasons. And again, not to drag on anyone, seems like a nice enough guy. But I think until we see it with the defense, I just am not going to believe it. We've been hearing over and over again that this will be the year that they kind of figure it out. This will be the year they figure it out. They've made these changes. Until we actually see it on the field, I don't think we have any really reason to buy into it. So I think it's going to have to be coming into the season, the starting assumption that the offense is going to have to score probably 30-plus points a game in order to be a competitive team. And maybe that's against higher level competition. You can probably get away with that against some of our early season opponents scoring a little bit less. But I think the standard needs to be a higher offensive output in order to compensate for a defense that really hasn't shown anything quite to this level. I think they're capable. I think the talent's there. It's just, we haven't seen it happen so far. So there's no reason to believe it for me, at least to this point.
I'm excited about what the secondary can be. I think you have 2 potentially NFL corners on the edge with guys with experience. I think there's 4 guys that can play at safety. I'm excited to see what Will Hardy can be. You have Caleb Cost coming in at nickel. You have some real players on secondary. I don't think a secondary can win you games. I think the defense all starts on the defensive line, but it's exciting on the back end. I think it's something that Mac Brown and this defense hasn't had. Experienced guys you can trust. The Tony Grimes era in Chapel Hill is over, and there's finally some guys who can actually play, potentially intercept the ball, and make some plays on that back end. Y'all feel that way? How do you feel about the secondary in the season?
I feel like the safety play has to be better. They have not gotten good safety play, I feel like, since Mac has been back in Chapel Hill. Gio Biggers, Don Chapman, appreciate your services, but those guys just were replacement level and below that as far as at the ACC level at safety. And even before them, Cam Kelly, he did make big plays when playing against Wake Forest, but outside of that was kind of a liability a lot of times. Did play well last year at Louisville, so maybe it was more so the coaching than it was him, but still, they have not gotten good to safety play. And the hope now is with a guy like Stick Lane back here for the second year, Georgia State transfer, Will Hardy finally healthy as he's been struggling with the shoulder injury, but still has gotten a decent amount of snaps in his first 2 seasons, getting Jakeem Harris, the taboo transfer from NC State, and then DeAndre Boykins, who played a lot of star a couple years ago towards ACL last year. He's now playing safety. And they brought in 6 guys in the recruiting class that were all secondary players, and one of them, what's it, Mount from the area. He was like a 4-star. They had another guy who's 4-star. They had some pretty solid secondary players for the future as well out there in the back end at safety. And in that corner, you brought it up, Huzzy, Marcus Allen, both those guys should be pretty good for them. They brought in the Mississippi Community College transfer and Terrain Stewart. I like the group that they have. Feels like they have more options and more depth and just more quality than they've had, especially at safety in recent years.
Some of these transfers, man, you got a D3 guy, you got a community college guy. It's just you get the alerts and you're like, where's this guy from? Yeah, you mentioned it. Marcus Allen, Elijah Huzzy. I feel great about those guys. Experience now, 2nd, 3rd year in the program. Huzzy, obviously, 2nd year. Guys that can make plays, experience, you can count on the edge there. Mike, any thoughts on the secondary? We'll move on from here.
It doesn't really matter how talented they are if we can't stop the run and we can't pressure the
Yep.
quarterback. If we have enough time to throw, all three of us could probably find a guy open with a long enough window. If we can't stop the run, then we're going to dedicate all our upfront folks to trying to do that, and we'll blow coverage. So yeah, we are very talented. That's fantastic, and I trust this group more than I have in the past. But that's not saying too much. I think, like we've mentioned, it all comes down to defensive line and whether or not we can stop the run and pressure the quarterback. I think 25 sacks last year with the talent we have is abysmal. We should be shoot. I think a successful season probably looks at 35 plus sacks. And hearing a Carolina defense in the last 5 years get 35 plus sacks just seems like impossible. So we'll see. I'm interested to see how that metric progresses through the season. I was super excited. Julian and Ross, we were all
Yeah.
there in Charlotte when we had 9 sacks, or what was it, 9 sacks against South Carolina or whatever.
9 sacks, 16 tackles for loss. I
Ungodly
recite it
number. And we looked
every
at each other
day.
like this is the beginning of the change. We're finally seeing it, and that was just the first step towards running at the football as Charlie Brown. So, we'll see.
I think
Even
it all
if they
starts. I
35
think it all
sacks
starts
doesn't
with
make
Travis
that
Shaw.
much.
Travis Shaw and Javari Ritzy. Dude, I hear my echo too. I think it all starts with Travis Shaw and Javari Ritzy. Those two guys need huge seasons. If they clock the middle, I feel good about what's on the edge. That's where it starts. You need a big season out of Travis Shaw, Josh Harris, Javari Ritzy. Javari Ritzy, man, that guy was such a big, talented, athletic freak recruit, and he's been mediocre. Like, where has he been? Is he undersized? Is he out of position? Should he play on the edge? Should he play the three technique? I'm eyeing him having a big year, and I think it's time for Travis Shaw to be like, do I want to be an NFL player? Do I want to make my family millions of dollars? Or do I want to just kind of flame out and be a guy, maybe get my degree? And it's just kind of I think it's a wake up moment for a lot of those guys who came in as 5 stars, who, with the reputation, with all this hype, getting NIL money, and now it's time to put up and shut up. Not to even mention Zach Rice. Like, I'm not sure that guy's going to even see the
Yeah.
field.
Well, I mean, a lot of
Mm.
people put a lot of focus on like Monachino coming in to be a defensive line
Yeah.
coach and having coached in the NFL. But you bring up a great point, Ross. Like, the best players are self-motivated. They don't need to be motivated by NIL money. They don't need to be motivated by cars. They don't need to be motivated by somebody else. Like, it has to be internal motivation. Like, do you want it or do you not want it? Like, Kamen Rucker certainly is a guy who wants it. Like, Elijah Huzzy is a guy who wants it. Like, Drake May, all the talent in the world, a guy who wants it. Like, do you want it or not? So, cool. Monachino's probably going to help him with their technique. He can't do it for him. When it's fourth quarter and when Minnesota's running it down their throat with Darius Taylor, are you going to step up and make a play? Or are you going to let them push you back? Like, they had guys in the past that were there, like Miles Murphy, 4-star guy, was there 4 years. And how many times you see him get pushed 3 yards off the ball? How many times you see Travis Shaw gasping for air? These guys not in shape. Like, it happens in the offseason. So we're sitting here, the work's already done. Like, they either put in the work or they didn't. And we're going to find out right off the bat on that Thursday night in Minneapolis whether these guys put in the work or not. So cool. Monachino's there. Cool, they made changes to the DC. They're going to be more multiple, actually be more aggressive. I think that will help. But can the guys actually execute? Like, it's not the coaches to me. There's plenty of talent on this roster, and when 247 puts out their talent team composite, this is going to be a top 20, 25 team yet again. Are they going to look like it? Or are they going to look like a top 70, 75 team like they have at times?
I think
I love
talking about Minnesota kind of leads right into how we think
Yep.
the season's going to go as a whole.
Yeah, let's go through the schedule. Good lead in, Mike. And I love the 247 shout outs from Julian, family company here. All right, let's go through the schedule briefly. Just one sentence or two about each game and give your pick and kind of how it lays out too. I think looking at schedule, you look at it as a whole, you look at it as a part, you see where the bye week is, and you kind of see where they might falter and because of away games or bye weeks, et cetera. All right, Minnesota at Minnesota in Minneapolis, 8 p.m. on Fox, prime time, Thursday, August 29th. What do y'all think happens there?
It's going to be a tough one to win. Minnesota's has, from all the reports, their best offensive line they've had under PJ Fleck, at least in a couple of seasons. Defensive line have some experience. Darius Taylor's a really good player, and the fact that he's still there in Minnesota speaks highly to their ability to retain some of their top talent. Outside of that, skill position-wise, like, they have one receiver. I think it was like Daniel Jackson. They're not that impressive on the outside, but they want to run it, and it's going to be a tough environment on the road. Is Carolina ready up front? I trust Minnesota more up front than Carolina. It's a line of scrimmage game, so I would take the Golden Gophers right now. Just going into that, just with all the questions I have about the interior of Carolina's defensive line and also just the offensive line as a whole.
Mike?
I'll set the lead Minnesota. I think it's a 2.5 point spread right now in favor of Minnesota. For me, it's more of a factor of, hey, we're starting the season, on the road with a new quarterback, regardless of how we think he's going to do, with a new defensive coordinator. There's a lot of new pieces in terms of leadership, in my opinion. I think that if there's been one hangup of the Mac Brown era, it's been kind of let down some big spots. This is a primetime game on a Thursday night to start the season, one of the first games of the week one college football season. And I think that's just a lot of pressure on the team early on. For me, I think it's a loss. I think it's going to be really close. But unfortunately, I don't think we're able to take advantage because I do think Carolina probably is a better team. I think if this were a little bit later in the season, I might buy into Carolina a little bit more. I just think it's right off the bat, it's not good for Carolina. I would have really liked a week 0 game this year.
Yeah. So you'll have them starting off 0-1. I mean, I think you can lean on the run game here. I'll just pick Carolina just to be different. But
I mean, I would lean. It's not
2.5.
necessarily. I think they're starting 0-1. I would lean Minnesota right now. Like Carolina is more talented. They have. I don't think Minnesota has the athletes Carolina has, but they're physical. And is Carolina going to be physical? Like last year, Drake May being Drake May and Ethan Kaliakmanis being Ethan Kaliakmanis was really the difference in that game.
Yeah. I mean, I think UNC wins. Load up on Marion Hampton. Lean on the run game. I'll pick Carolina. Let's move on here. Sorry about the technical difficulties here. Charlotte at home. Let's run through these. Charlotte at home, then NC Central at home, and you have James Madison at home. If UNC gets past Minnesota, they have a good chance to go 4-0. The tough one obviously is against Minnesota. What do y'all think about how the return of Dre Bly, the return of Tim Brewster at Charlotte coming into Kenan Stadium? That's kind of an interesting game. Charlotte's kind of an up-and-coming type program. And then you have Central and Madison. James Madison is obviously one of the better teams that was in the FCS, now in the FBS. They're still making noise, but not a Power 4 team.
Yeah, I mean, Charlotte's not going to be able to block Carolina. Brought in a bunch of transfers again. Like, that's not going to be a good team. Central, it's Central. That's one of those games you hope that you can get your starters out at halftime and play a lot of young guys, something they don't typically get to do until later on in the season. So I think that is beneficial. Like, Charlotte should be the same way. Like, those should be developmental games for this roster and trying to find some depth. James Madison, it really should not be a close game. Like JMU lost their head coach, Kurt Signetti, went to Indiana. They lost their quarterback who went to Texas State, and all their better players are gone. Like I think Bob Chesney, who's coming over from Holy Cross, is going to do a good job there. But that is not a game that should be close at all. Going to be plenty of JMU folks traveling down as that's already sold out, and we'll see how much purple and gold is in there. Like those 3 games really should not be difficult at all. JMU will make them play at least into the third quarter, I would think. But those should be really developmental games. And potentially this is team sitting at 4-0. That should be maybe pretty healthy and feeling pretty good about themselves heading into that game at Duke on the road for the victory bell.
I think if Charlotte or NC Central are an issue, we're in much deeper trouble than we realize. And we really need to reassess at midseason or quarter season at that point. I think JMU will be interesting. Just pointing out Holy Cross's coach. I think Holy Cross did give Boston College some trouble last year, so it's not like they can't be a thorn in the side of ACC talent. I think that since we're at home, I think those games shouldn't be an issue. For me, 3-1 going into Duke is probably where I think we'll be sitting at.
And
Right.
next we have at Duke on, let's see the date here, September 28th at Duke. Yeah, new coach, the old Miami coach in Durham. This is a game like Duke should not be a rival. This should not be a competition between UNC and Duke here. The rival's NC State. You beat Duke. That's always is. Duke's kind of come up recently. Mac Brown's done pretty well against Duke. Any thoughts on this game? Anything that stand out to you, Julian?
Yeah, I mean, Mac has not lost to Duke since coming back. He's done a great job against Duke. He's done a great job against Wake. Has not done so good against Virginia and NC State, which I think are 2 of the bigger football rivals, more so than Wake Forest and Duke are. He owns Manny Diaz. Like, since Manny Diaz gave up like those 600 rushing yards to Taysom Hill back at BYU, like Mac Brown has had that man over a barrel. So I think they go to Durham and they win that game. I saw that while we're recording this, Malik Murphy is going to be the starting quarterback. It would not shock me if by then Grayson Loftus turns out being the starter. So Murphy was not that impressive at Texas last year. He does have a pretty doggone good receiver in Jordan Moore on the outside. Not too much else as far as weaponry, and their offensive line is replacing a first-round pick, another draft pick. Like we're replacing a lot. And because it's Duke, they're bringing in a Lafayette transfer, a Holy Cross transfer, an Elon transfer, and a dude from UCLA who was not good at left tackle. Like, that's a game Carolina should dominate in the trenches and win that also pretty handily.
I'm only going to point out that if Malik Murphy is getting knocked for how he played at Texas, then we probably shouldn't highlight how Max Johnson, we're talking that SEC to ACC transfer type thing.
Well,
I
Big
just think,
12, Big 12.
Yeah, well, okay, soon to be SEC. Sorry. I think Malik Murphy will still have the starting quarterback job for me personally. I don't think Loftus is anything terribly special. I think Malik Murphy has some really, talent, deep level talent there. I don't think he's an NFL quarterback, but I think he's got some athleticism that makes him a threat, especially in the ACC and some of the lower level competition that Duke's probably facing early in the season. I think it will be a challenge. I would happily trade a loss to Manny Diaz and Duke for the first time and MAC 2.0 for a win against FSU for the first time this season. But I know how you feel.
Definitely not. Get your hands off my bell.
Yeah. Well, I knocked on wood when we were talking about Duke having not lost to Duke since Matt got back. I do think Carolina wins that game in Durham. I don't think Duke packs the stadium very well, especially after coming down, like losing everything from last year. Kind of a really nice one season off for them, and they still lost to Carolina. And a pretty incredible game that Ross and I got to watch in Ann Arbor.
Oh, yeah.
But that was fun.
That was fun. Forgot about that.
So, yeah, I think we take care of business against Duke.
Have you seen what Duke's doing with to getting more fans into the stadium? Did y'all see that news?
Yeah, didn't they hire like some influencer to be like their like vibes guy or something like that?
Yeah, they're bringing on DJs for every game. They're having like a pretty well-known DJ. Obviously, I didn't know any of the names, and then they're hiring like influencers to post about it. They're trying to get more like Durham people to the game, so they're making it more of an event with like these DJs and influencers. Kind of weird. But they gotta try something.
Credit, though,
yeah,
because like I went to the game 2 years ago in Durham, and it was a night game. It was like a family weekend. It was on ACC primetime, and never been to the old Horseshoe on West Campus for a game. And I thought that was an awesome atmosphere for a great game that Drake May played in Carolina getting to victory. Like, I think the atmosphere actually can be pretty good again if it is like the same kind of setting. But you got to try something.
Yeah,
if you're Duke. Like, it's not like they've Elko got him back to being respectable. So their hope is that Diaz can do that and they can get some more energy and buzz around the city.
They have to do something, especially in the era of conference realignment. You can't afford to have a football team that doesn't have an excited fan base moving forward. So
and that Notre Dame game was awesome when game day was there. And then the game they won, was it early? Was it Clemson? Yeah, it was Clemson. Clemson, first game of the season. That was an incredible. The atmosphere was rocking. All right, let's move along here. So you have versus Pitt. October hits here, so Saturday, October 5th. Pitt and Georgia Tech. Let's kind of combo those together. Both games at home. So after away at Duke, you have two more home games against. You got a new coach at Georgia Tech. You got the same old coach at Pitt. These are games you're kind of like, all right, they're gonna lose one of these. It's kind of approach these kind of games. Like you're not. It's tough to go 2-0 against these two teams. Do have them at home. Julian, any brief thoughts on Pitt and Tech?
Pitt's quarterback play was just so bad last year. I just can't imagine whether it's Nate Yarnell or Eli Holstein, the Bama transfer, they're going to be that bad. But also, like, they've been pretty reductive since they got Mark Whipple out the door after they won the ACC title with Kenny Pickett. It's not like they have the most talent on the outside. So I have my concerns about Pitt offensively. Defensively, when Deion Hayes, your best defensive lineman, says he wants to go somewhere where he can contend, and he goes to Colorado, that says a lot about what he thinks about your offense. So that's a game Carolina, I think, should win. Yes, he'll be physical. Narduzzi's going to have something for him defensively. I just think overall talent-wise, I don't think Pitt has that kind of roster right now to be that concerned about them. And Georgia Tech, they're going to be good offensively again. And you've seen how those second-year transfers have performed. How Bo Nix played again this past year at Oregon. Well, Michael Penix was able to do this past year at Washington. And Haynes King was a top 100 recruit. Like, that was a big-time quarterback coming out of the state of Texas at A&M. Like what Jaden Daniels did his second year at LSU. I'm not saying he's going to win the Heisman Trophy. He's going to go on to be a first-round pick. But the kid's talented, and they were doggone good last year. He takes care of the football more. Love Jamal Haynes. Love Rutherford. Love that wide receiver core as a whole. And their offensive line's always going to be good with Brent Key as their own line coach. They just got a 5-star last week. Like, they're going to start recruiting a lot better, too, in that Georgia area. Defensively, though, they're horrid. Like, it's going to be a high-scoring game. I remember there was that, like, 60-50 game back on a homecoming, like a couple years ago between these two teams. It could be just like that or what we saw last year in Atlanta, where Carolina had opportunities to go up by 3 scores, couldn't do it, and they couldn't get any sort of stops, especially on the ground. Like, that's a game where Tech's going to be physical. I just don't know how good Tech's going to be defensively, but also don't know how good Carolina's going to be defensively.
I think that brings up a good point, right? When we do this kind of like projection and try and predict what's going to happen with these games, I think there's a lot of focus on how the other team's going to play. I think that what's been stereotypical of the Matt Brown era is kind of that random loss in mid-October that just kind of comes out of nowhere against a team that are better than on paper and you should win. I'm not sure who it's going to be, if it's Pittsburgh or Georgia Tech. I lean Georgia Tech, and just our offense not be able to keep up with theirs and our defense just not being able to stop them. I do think we lose one of those games. I'll be interested to see what the times are for these games. I think like if we can bring a packed house and bring a lot of atmosphere, that might be able to help a little bit. I am a believer in a good home crowd makes a difference. If it's a noon kickoff for one of these games, that might really hamstring us in terms of kind of getting fans in there. Because again, I just don't. I think a lot of people are kind of out on Carolina football coming into this season. So we'll see. I think count me down for an L against Georgia Tech, but a win against Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
and that's why.
I like this Tech team. I know their schedule is hard this year. I wouldn't be shocked if they beat Florida State in Dublin. Like, I don't have faith in DJU. I have faith in Mike Norvell, though. And Florida State's got a ton of talent on the defensive line, which is going to be a good match against that Tech offensive line. But I think they can beat Louisville. I think that's a good Georgia Tech team. Like, defensively, especially that front four, concerns. But Kyle Eford, that linebacker's good. They got some experienced guys in the secondary, especially at safety, like LaMiles Brooks. I think it's a good Georgia Tech team that with a softer schedule could win 9 games, provided that their defense, can be average, which Carolina's been asking for. Like, that's a team that's gonna be a tough out. I think that's gonna be the toughest out early on, other than Minnesota.
Who knew you were gonna get this type of breakdown of Georgia Tech from Julian? Love it. And that's why winning. I mean, like beating Minnesota and just making sure you're not dropping the Charlotte Central James Madison games. Like, you want those fans to be there in October. Like Mike said, for Pittsburgh and Georgia Tech. Like, you can't lose to Duke on the road and then expect a packed crowd for a noon kickoff for Pittsburgh. It's got to be, 4-1, 5-0, and then you'll get those crowds. But the way UNC fans are, it's going to be tough to draw a rowdy crowd for Pitt and Georgia Tech if you're limping into it with 2 losses. Leading into, there's a bye week after that. And then we got the Mike Hardison Bowl. Saturday, October 26th, in Charlottesville. One of my favorite places to watch a game, at Virginia. We follow that with ranked right now, number 10, Florida State. Virginia, the House of Horrors for the Tar Heels and Mac Brown. It was a brutal game last year in Chapel Hill. It always seems like, I think UNC beat Virginia last time in Charlottesville, but
they did.
2 road games, UVA and Florida State. Guys, Julian?
I got to take the UVA if you don't mind.
Okay.
Last year on my birthday against UVA, my mom, my entire mom's side of the family, Virginia Wahoo fans through and through. She's been a great sport, very quietly rooted for Virginia during the game. Invite all friends and family into town. Hey, come watch us beat up on this, pretty bad team as a top team at home. And we lay the biggest egg of all time. I will say this. I truly think that Carolina is going to remember that game. That derailed the entire season. I think they've got something to prove. I don't believe in Virginia. Everyone here in Charlottesville is basically saying we'll be lucky if we win 2 or 3 games this year. Carolina should win this game handily. I think they're going to exercise some demons out here. I think it's going to be a really great time. I hope you both are. I know Julian's making it up there, Ross. Feel free to come on up. We'll have a good on tailgate up here. I've already told the UVA Business School folks to prepare for the fact that I will be down on the Who's all week, and they need to expect it. So very excited for that game. I think Carolina takes care of business, and I'm normally a pretty pessimistic fan. As for FSU, 0 chance. Carolina is losing that game. I think that it is more likely that I think it's less likely that we win that game, that would be like Carolina going to the college football playoff this year. There's just no chance we're beating FSU. I think Mike Norvell has that team motivated. Mac Brown cannot beat Florida State to save his life. So two opposite ends of the spectrum there. So count me down for a very confident W against UVA, and count me down for a very confident L against FSU.
Yeah, I haven't really dug into Virginia yet, and for good reason. Like, this is not going to be a team that really should be contending for anything other than they're hoping to get 4 or 5 wins. Like Tony Elliott, we've seen like that Clemson system hasn't even been good at Clemson, and Dabo's kind of abandoned it for Garrett Riley. And they don't have the talent that he's had at Clemson, especially out wide. They don't have the talent at Virginia. Like, I do like, was it Malachi Fields? He's a pretty good receiver. They had one last year. Washington was awesome. Calandria, if he's a quarterback, he's pretty reckless. He's fun as hell to watch, but he's going to throw some picks. Like, Musket doesn't impress me. That's a game Carolina should win. Like, if they have 3 losses, put it in the bank. If there's somehow 1 loss undefeated, like, yeah, you're not going to feel pretty good about the potential winning at UVA. But that's a game, like, they should win that game. I'm not going to say they're going to win in Charlottesville, but it's a team that they should beat. Let's say that. I'm not going to say that they should beat Virginia in Charlottesville or that they're going to win in Charlottesville, but against that Virginia team, that is a team that they should be able to beat. But we'll see where that happens. Florida State, I think Florida State's good. I also think they're the 3rd best team in the ACC this year. I like Miami more than I like them. I like Clemson more than I like them. Like, I'm pretty high on Clemson this season. Like, Florida State, this is a rebuilding year for them, but like their rebuild's probably going to still yield 9, maybe 10 wins, depending on kind of how they can go about things. Like, I have concerns about them against Georgia Tech this upcoming weekend. Like, DJ, he was better last year. His QBR was up, but you look at kind of the numbers, they're pretty similar to what he had in 2022 at Clemson. And I don't know if I trust that. This is not a big game, so I wouldn't I don't know. I can't trust them in a big game. And they should be able to run the ball just fine. Their offensive line is going to be outstanding. Defensive line is going to be great. And that's where they're going to be able to win this football game, because I don't have confidence right now in this O-line. Now, by that time in November, as they've gelled, it's possible. But Willie Lampkin, as good as he is, as hard as he plays, he's undersized, and that is not a guy who's going to be able to hold up. Just so you look at the Clemson game last year, DeMonte Capehart ran through him all game long. Like, that's a guy that is good, but it's just not a game where I see Carolina be able to block Florida State, and they're going to need – they've had some decent luck recently in Tallahassee before Mac Brown. Like, 2020, they blew that game. They had no problem. They should not have lost that game. But before, like, the Nick Weiler game, TJ Yates back in that lost 2010 season, they've sneakily won their recent trips in Tallahassee. I don't think this would be the year to do it. Mac Brown is not. That's a game that, Florida State's a better team.
That Florida State game in Chapel Hill, when I think UNC was the better team and they blew it, God, that was painful.
Yeah.
21.
And it's
21.
Yeah. And it's
Well,
surprising
it turns out it was a 6 and 7 Carolina team, so maybe they weren't that good.
And it's surprising that Florida State couldn't go out and get a better quarterback than DJU. Like, Florida State's a top 10, top 15 team. I'm surprised they couldn't go and pay someone. Maybe they're just not where they are with NIL and just kind of took a safe option, kind of what UNC did.
They wanted
got an
Cam
experienced
Ward.
guy. Yeah.
They wanted Cam Ward, but he went to the draft, and like, look at Miami. They have a guy was Reese Poffenbarger from Albany, who is going to be their quarterback until they're able to get Cam Ward to decide to go back to college. Like, that's who Florida State wanted. They just weren't going to wait around, and they got a guy who is a known commodity, and they put him with the best play caller in college football. So, I don't think they're not going to be able to win in the playoff if they get there, but they can get to the playoff and win the ACC with DJ.
All right, let's wrap this up and move on to some expectations. We might have to push basketball, unless y'all have time, push basketball to another pod. Wake Forest.
I'm so locked in on football, man, so I can't even think about basketball right now.
Dude, I had no idea Julian was so locked into I don't pay attention to other teams. I focus on UNC.
You should have heard Julian talking about the Rose Bowl.
Oh God.
He had my heart set on Airbnbs in Pasadena, man.
I mean,
this guy's the eternal Carolina optimist.
Are you hearing all the optimism today? I mean, I'm telling you, not great in the trenches.
your job is Carolina Panthers, but dude, your college football knowledge is unmatched right now. All right, so 2 games. It's like you got the big power schools, then it's the private schools. November 16th at home versus Wake Forest. November 23rd. It's gonna be cold up there right before Thanksgiving at Boston College. Those are 2 games that I think if UNC wants to be this SEC team, this power football team that's going to play with the likes of Tennessee and South Carolina and Georgia, you can't lose or even get pushed around by a Wake Forest or Boston College. There's a completely different recruiting base. They recruit completely different players, completely different facilities, very big difference in terms of funding, alumni base, student base. But Wake Forest and Boston College, it's been a little while since they played Boston College. Julian, your early thoughts on home versus Wake and then on the road up in Chestnut Hill?
They've had some doozies against Wake since Matt got back. You think about, 21. Wake is 10-0, undefeated, going into Chapel Hill, whatever. They were like top 10 undefeated going to Chapel Hill that cold November day, and Sam Howell brings him back. The year prior, when he decided, let's go ahead and give Tony Grimes and JQ Quantley and a bunch of these young guys a chance to get some stops, Sam Howell brings him back in that game. In 2022, that game over in Winston-Salem, the Clemson Coastal, like that. They've had some great games. I don't know if this is going to be one of them this year. Like, I'm not super high on Wake. Hank Bachmeier, once upon a time, was Boise State's quarterback in his first start, went on the road and won in Tallahassee, something, as we know, Mac Brown knows nothing about as North Carolina's head coach. I don't know. He wasn't great at La Tech last year. He should be an upgrade from what they had last year. Did not like Mitch Griffiths at all. Like, running back wise, I'm not super high on Wake. Like, in receivers, they lost a lot of guys. They lost a guy to Nebraska, lost one to State, and they lost one to Indiana. Like, Donovan Green, he's good, but he's missed 2 years because of a knee injury. Should be good on a defensive line. That's a game I think Carolina, at home especially, they should be able to beat this Wake team. I'm not super high on Wake this year. And then Boston College, like, come on. I'm curious who's going to be the quarterback at Boston College, because I remember last season, Jalen Milroe at Alabama was talking about how Bill O'Brien told him, you're not a quarterback. If Jalen Milroe's not a quarterback, is Thomas Castellanos a quarterback at Boston College with Bill O'Brien there as their head coach and play caller? Like, I have my concerns about who's going to be BC's quarterback. Like, I feel like Bill O'Brien's going to sandbag that team and try to get the guy who he thinks is the real quarterback down the line. You should never lose to Boston College at all. Like, that was the last time they played. I think it was 2020 in the pandemic. They were able to win that game in week 2 of that season. They should beat BC.
Yeah, keep it short and sweet. I think we take care of business against Wake. I haven't seen anything. I think Wake loses too much talent. I think Carolina at home takes care of that pretty easily. Boston College is one of those games where it's like, let's see where Bill O'Brien has them at the end of the season, because I don't think it will be good. I think it's going to be a pretty challenging season for Boston College. And I think it might be one of those teams that's kind of checked out by the time that we get there. That's a team that's gonna have a hard time filling up a stadium, especially on a cold November day up in Boston. So I'll take 2 wins on those 2 games pretty easily.
And let me say this too: like, these are games where you have to build your depth for. Wake Forest historically has not been able to have the depth for November games. They've had great starts and they fall apart because they just don't have the depth. Boston College with a new head coach, I just don't think they're going to have the depth. Like, North Carolina has to be able to have more depth than those 2 teams. And like, the schedule this year, it sets up for them to be able to win those games, because it's not like they're playing Clemson. It's not like they're playing, I mean, they have to play NC State. We know that, but it's not like you're having that kind of high level team super late into the season like they did like a year ago. So those are games just like depth wise. Carolina has to be in a better spot, unless, I mean, there's just a rash of injuries and there's nothing they could do about it. But I don't think that should be the case this season as far as just depth.
There was a time this summer when I realized that Bill O'Brien was the coach at Boston College. I forgot that he was hired there. It's kind of crazy. I mean, he was an NFL head coach. He's a famous guy for the Patriots, the OC at Alabama. He was on Hard Knocks. It's just crazy. He's now at Boston. He kind of fits there, obviously, with his name and his pedigree, but it's funny. Okay, and let's close it out. This game last year, NC State, I was violently sick. It was coming out of both holes, and I had to watch UNC get completely destroyed by State. It was over by the second quarter. UNC came out not ready. You had Peyton Wilson flying all around. They were attacking Drake May. It was a depressing game. And I don't know, I mean, Mike, you didn't grow up in North Carolina, but This game means so much to obviously to like the fans, but like if you have NC State alumni friends, like this is the game. Like this is the rivalry game. And UNC and NC State, I feel like, are the exact same program in football. Like UNC is not better than State, in my opinion, in football. It's a very similar program. It kind of ebbs and flows. One team goes on a little run, one team goes on a little run. I think State right now may be the stronger program. After what Mac Brown did with, Sam Howell and Drake May, I just think it's a very balanced program, and one team will win a couple games, the other team will come back and win a couple games, and like one team's riding high, and the other team's riding high. I remember Michael Carter and Javonte Williams killing State. There's been some huge games that I've seen it like last year when it's super depressing to watch UNC versus State. So I mean, this is a game like if you're the head coach of UNC, you target, you win. It's for recruiting, it's for prize, for alumni. It's for raising money. It's a huge game, and it's a good way to finish the season. Julian?
Yeah, you look at when Matt came back, 2019, both those teams needed to win to go to a bowl. Carolina went into Carter Finley and blew them out. 2020, State couldn't stop them that season. And in 2021, Carolina was supposed to win that game in Carter Finley again. And then the rivalry's kind of flipped on its head since that opportunity. In 2022, better team. Special teams get some kill at the end of the day. And then last year, Carolina didn't show up. And, Mac Brown came out and told fans, we won 8 games. That's pretty good around here. I mean, I would prefer what's going on in Raleigh right now where Dave Doran's got them 9-4, 8-5, 9-3, 8-4, one season anomaly, 4-8 as they're trying to rebuild, 9-4, 9-4. He has done a phenomenal job there in West Raleigh, and I got a ton of respect for him and his program and what they've been able to build. But as far as like historically, like NC State, they're one of 6 Power 4 schools that have never finished in the AP top 10. So I don't want to hear anybody ever talk about this as a football school because they haven't won ACC since 79. I understand Carolina's won since 80. Oh my God, you got one 10-win season in history of their program. And Carolina has an opportunity this year to potentially prevent that from being the case where they could have 2. So at State, I'm very curious to see what this offense is going to look like. On paper, they can be scary. But what Grayson McCall are they getting? Are they getting a Grayson McCall from like 2020 and 2021? Or are they getting a guy from the last couple of years who's been pretty banged up? I still think he's a good quarterback. I just have my questions there. And playing against a P4 schedule the whole season, unlike playing the Sun Belt, Jordan Waters was outstanding at Duke. Like he could be the first 1,000-yard rusher. They haven't had one since Reggie Gillespie in 2018. Like they have Ike Ekwonu who goes in the first round. They have Chandler Zavala, who's a 4th-round pick. Like, and their offensive line doesn't have the same physicality as defensive line. Like, I don't know where the disconnect is with that program. So until they can run the ball consistently, I really question just how good of an offense it can be. Like, Casey is awesome. Great job by them to keep him. But it's not like Wesley Grimes did anything at Wake Forest the last 2 years. Noah Rogers, Uber recruit out of the Raleigh area, went to Ohio State and didn't play. There's no shame in that. They paid a ton of money to get Jonathan Paylor. On paper, they have the talent. I just would bet on their offensive receivers being better in 2025 than I would this season. Now, by the end of the year, we'll see. I don't think they're going to be as good defensively, but until Carolina proves me that they can match State defensively and as physicality-wise, hard for me to sit here and believe that Carolina is going to go out there and win that game. And here's the difference, too, between the two programs. It's like there's respect, but there's hatred on that side. And you look at a lot of rivalries in college football, I feel like it's just who hates the other team more. Like I watched Louisville, Kentucky last year. Louisville, better team. Kentucky hates Louisville. And they showed it and went there and kicked their ass. State hates Carolina. Mac Brown has respect for State, but it doesn't seem like he has any sort of hatred for the people wearing red and black. Like that's just the thing. If you're not going to show up one week and just have pure hate and give that energy and that effort and that physicality, I don't really know what you're doing here, man. So that's a must win for Mac Brown this year. All the other games, obviously important. Do not lose NC State. And if he does, then I just don't see how long it's going to carry on and how people are going to feel any better about this team moving to 2025. Like, hell, they could go 11-0. You lose in Raleigh, you lose at home against State, ain't going to go over well. So that's a must win in my book, and not a game that I'm not going to sit here 4 months before and bank on Carolina winning.
Yeah, Ross, I'm just going to say one thing real quick. I mean, I've grown up a Carolina fan, but I hate State just with the best of them, man. I do not want to lose this game. Last year, you may have been sick. I was on duty on watch on an aircraft carrier, and a fire broke out in the middle of that. So I had to leave watching the game to deal with the fire. I was actually grateful for the fire to take me away from that game. It was one of those games that was just a train wreck in slow motion, and it was bad, and then it got worse, and then it got even worse. I think Julian hit all the key points. For me, I'm more high on Grayson McCall because he's surrounded by all that talent. I think he's got way more talent than he did at Coastal. So I don't think he has to take the load on his shoulders like he has in the past. I think that offense is going to be improved. I do think the defense is going to take a step back. Obviously, they lose a lot of leadership on the defense. I think what it comes down to is just how you hear Mac Brown talk about NC State and how you hear him talk about it after a loss. I mean, Dave Dorian is in the locker room on national television trashing your program right after the win in an embarrassing win, needless to say.
He called them SOBs on the ACC network, and Mac didn't have a problem with it.
We all heard it, and Mac Brown just said, all right, we should be having about 8 games. And, I mean, that was when I think he lost a lot of fan base. I think Mac Brown would have had a lot more buy-in for this season if he came out and was furious about it. And maybe he is internally. He's great at PR. He's great, outwardly facing. He's a great face for the program. So maybe he's able to kind of keep it just between him and the locker room. That's how it should be. But for the fans, I would have liked to see a little bit more animosity, a little bit more enmity towards Dave Doran over there. Until we hate them as much as they hate us as a program, because I think our fans hate them just on an equal level as their fans hate us at this point. But until the team feels that, until the program feels that, I'm taking NC State as much, and it's gonna kill me to say it. And I think that leads into a larger point here, which is this is not a successful season if we lose to State again. If we lose to State based on the track record I've been keeping, we could be 8-4 and with a loss to State. And we may be in the exact same Groundhog Day type scenario where Mac Brown is saying, hey, we won 8 games as this is a winning season. We're going to a bowl game, but the fan base is going to be out. You're going to lose the fan base entirely if you lose the State again.
Yeah.
I
can't disagree.
That was well said by both of y'all. All right, let's let that lead into kind of a combo segment, kind of pushing together a bunch of things we were going to talk about at the end. So expectations for this year, we've touched on a little bit. Going through the schedule, kind of seeing how it's going to shake out. What are your expectations for this team here sitting on Monday, August 19th? And what does that say about where the program is and kind of how you feel about direction of UNC football and Mac Brown at the helm of it? I know it's a lot in that. It's a loaded question. But I think 8-4. Well, I think my losses are going to be, all right, let's be realistic. Minnesota, one of Pitt and Georgia Tech. That's 2. I think Florida State, 3. And I think, luckily, lose NC State or it's going to be Virginia, Wake Forest, Boston College. Like maybe lose one of those. So I think 4 losses is kind of, I think the over-under should be right around there, like 8 wins. That's where I stand. And I think with this schedule, I mean, I think you're kind of leaving disappointed with some of those late season losses. And then you're looking at where this program is. Mac Brown, year 6, doesn't have a quarterback. Recruiting's taken a little bit of a dip. But look, dude, I think Mac Brown's done a great job. PR, building facilities, getting the older donors involved, navigating the NIL and transfer portal stuff. Like someone had to do it. It's a tough job.
Yeah.
Not every coach could do that. I think he did it with grace. I think UNC is now at a point with NIL, with all the different collectives combining, where they can kind of get to the level where they need to be. You're never going to compete with SEC until you're getting those funds from the SEC conference. But I think they're going to be able to be upper echelon of the ACC. But like kind of what next? I think this is a big transition season. I talked to Mike on the phone yesterday. I think this is like a transition season. Like, is it going to be Mac for the next 3 years? Or is this kind of like, all right, 8 wins, you got us where we got to go. We need someone else to kind of take it from here. I don't want to like put Mac on the hot seat here in mid-August, but I think this season is going to kind of tell a lot about the direction of the season and where fans want UNC football to be, where it is, and where it can be. And the fact that I think a lot's going to come down to whether Max Johnson or Connor Harrell can win a game or two. That might be the difference. It might come down to that, or if the defensive line can make some stops. Broad question here, Julian. You dive in. We'll kind of go back and forth, and we'll get out of here.
Yeah, I mean, recruiting is obviously the lifeblood of a program. Like NIL is important. It's great that Carolina finally woke up and realized maybe we should have one centralized NIL, like a school like Tennessee, which is killing it in recruiting, by the way. And that hurts Carolina. The Vols are back, man. They just got David Sanders, 5-star offensive tackle from the Charlotte area, Providence Day High School, where Carolina is pretty connected with Jordan Shipp, Zayd Lott, who's in that class of 2026. Some other guys are looking at as well. But Tennessee got their guy. And you look also at Faison Brandon from Grimsley, another school Carolina's been pretty connected. Alex Taylor and Travis Shaw. Tennessee got that guy. Tennessee being back is going to make it difficult for Carolina to recruit, especially in this new P2 era where it's Big Ten and it's SEC and in everybody else. So that's going to be hard. NIL dollars, being able to retain players is important. I think Carolina's actually done a really good job. The whole Diego Pound situation, from my understanding, was really the Carolina saying they would match the kid going back to and saying, actually, I want more. And what are you going to do? Like, you're not going to pay $400,000 for a left tackle in the ACC, at least if you're Carolina. Now they have to kind of think about what they want the program to be. And if they go 8-4, where in my mind, the only games that they should lose, if they're going to lose, are Minnesota, Georgia Tech, Florida State, and NC State. Like, they shouldn't lose another team outside of that. And if they go 8-4 and they lose all 4 of those games, another loss to State, and State has kind of season where they're not playing a great schedule either, where they can get to 9-10 wins. And I don't think they're going to play for the ACC title, but they might have an opportunity if Florida State or Miami or Clemson slips up again this year. So, yeah, there's going to be some questions. Like, I look at, too, like I'm looking at 247, and I was telling y'all earlier, you got to look at just where the averages are. And I'm looking at right now, their class is 50th. They only have 14 commits, but their average is only 5 behind Penn State, who's a top 15 class. So he's not doing that bad. He's just not bringing in that many guys. And I didn't wonder, okay, you're going to be heavy on the portal when you don't want to pay players out of the portal. So I just think even after this year, they're going to have to figure out what they want this football program to be beyond Mac Brown, whether he comes back for a 7th year or not. What does Carolina football want to be? At some point in time, they wanted to be a big-time football program with Butch Davis, rather, and then the whole tweet happened with Marvin Austin, NCAA came around, and they got spooked. And they didn't have the kind of leadership there with Holden Thorpe back in the day that was ready for big-time athletics. And now they have a new chancellor. How bought in is he? How bought in is Bubba Cunningham and everyone, the donors, the board? How bought in are they in being good at football? I've always questioned that. People say, oh, they donated a lot of money and all that, like getting the money from the Grady White guy and all that, but they brought back an older coach just to reestablish recruiting in the state of North Carolina, get fan interest. But what's next? Like, when is Carolina going to do something? Because I heard for years, I'm not ever just going to say they're going to be Georgia, but I heard for years about how Georgia should be better. They should be better until they finally got on the same page. And Tennessee is kind of the same way, where for 15 years, couldn't get a line, got on the right page, and they're back to being what they should be. Like, Carolina should be better than what they've been. I'm just wondering, after this year, are people going to start to realize what it takes to win big-time college athletics nowadays, especially in this portal and NIL era, or are they going to just be fine with 8-4? Because from what I've seen my entire lifetime, they seem to be pretty satisfied with 8-4, even though people don't like Mac Brown throwing in their face and telling them that, because the money stands for it. The fact that people aren't going to be showing up to games likely this year speaks to it. I mean, you get a new head coach. Are you really going to be bought in? Because we go through this, it feels like every 5 or 6 years in Chapel Hill, and the results are still the same, and the apathy around his fan base is still the same. So I don't know. I'm not trying to blame the fans. Are people really committed in Chapel Hill, around the university, to having a top 15, top 20 kind of football program, which North Carolina, looking at all the talent in the state, should have?
The same point though, right? Like, go ahead.
Let me say one thing. All right, so the 15 recruits, what do they have signed right now, committed right now? That is like by design, because they want to have room for transfers. But like you said, and another thing real quick, if they go 8-4, Julian, do you want Mac Brown back? Like, if he goes 8-4, lost to State, do you want Mac Brown back? At what point is it like pulling the plug there?
Well, what are they going to do? Are they going to go out there and are they going to give a coach $7 million and give him an assistant pool to pay the assistants $2 million, the coordinators $2 million? Clemson's paying their offensive and defensive line coaches $1 million. You're going to go pay that? Because if you're not, what does it matter? That's my thing. Is the recruiting budget, the NIL, the salary pool going to be like that? Because you look at Clemson, there's no reason Clemson should be as good as they are. There's a reason Dabo said little old Clemson for all those years. They didn't win anything since 81. It was every year expectations, and then what we've seen the last couple of years. Like, that was the Clemson football I remember up until Dabo finally got things really turned around there in 2015. Like, that's my thing. You're going to fire Mac, but are you going to put the investment more into facilities? You're going to put the investment in NIL, in coaching salaries, Are you going to do something
Yep.
different, or is it going to be the same?
It's really about getting the support from, I mean, I hate to say it, but fans and donors to bring in the money necessary to get that pool for assistance. It's the investment in the program, which, I mean, every program is trying to do. It's just not easy. It's easier said than done. Mike, a lot there. What are your takes on this? I mean, I feel like Julian, this is like therapy for Julian. Like,
we're hearing a lot.
Chance to like, it's his
I mean,
chance to just rant.
They'll do whatever it takes to win at basketball. They'll do whatever it takes to win at basketball. They will not do whatever it takes to win at football.
Look,
It's just that simple.
But
I don't
yeah,
care
but
about the 70
I don't think
years
you
of,
can.
like, history. Do you want to win or not?
Yeah, but like every time we call out on the fans, and I'm just as guilty of it as you are. Every time we call on the fans to show up, we lay an egg. I mean, how many cold, rainy Charlotte bowl games or or starter games have we lost? The ACC championship games, where we've just not even just a loss, we've absolutely no showed. Every time we call on the fans and we think that we might be turning the page, maybe we're on the precipice of being this big time program. We get into the spotlight and we just stumble and fall on our face. And so, like, in defense of the fans, I agree with you, right? Like, we have to throw money at this, right? There's really no solution unless you're throwing money at this problem, which sounds weird. And you obviously need more effective leadership than just throwing money at a problem. But for the fans to actually be motivated, you have to win a big game every now and then. The last big game I remember being like, oh my God, I did not think we could win that one. We came in, we showed up, was that blowout win against Miami down in Coral Gables. So, like, for me, and there's been some great wins in between, but the last time I felt like we were significantly, the underdog and kind of showed up to play was that Miami game. So, yes, from the fan side of the house, I disagree. I just think that we have to show up, and I think this is the larger point, we just need to know what the plan is, right? Mac Brown is 72 years old, right? There's a reason why coaches go negative against him, and this being his last season in recruiting. It's because he's 72 years old. So I don't think we can all sit here. I think at this point, it feels like we're just kind of treading water with Mac Brown, and Mac Brown's happy to kind of keep getting 7, 8, 9 wins a season because he does love coaching. And I love Mac Brown. I have a dog named after the guy, for God's sake, right? I love the guy. But at the end of the day, are we moving forward? Are we taking that leap? We had a small window at the beginning of his tenure in Mac 2.0 where it felt like it was possible, but now we just kind of feel back like that kind of fringe 25 in that 25 to 40 ranked team range where it's like we're not bad, we're not bottom of the ACC, but we're not blowing the doors off anybody, we're not surprising anybody, and so I kind of want just some proof of concept from our athletic department leadership in terms of, hey, this is what we're going to do, because I do think conference realignment, there is a scary time to be a mediocre football team, right? It's a scary time to be a mediocre football program. And
it doesn't matter for Carolina, though. I mean,
I know, I get that argument, and that's for another day, right? But it would be nice to kind of be walking into this new world, which I think we all know is coming, with a little bit more momentum than just sticking around at 8-5 and losing to our rival at the end of the season every year.
yeah.
So
they need identity. I agree with that. They do need an identity and a plan. I'm not speaking more to the fans. I'm speaking to like the people who make decisions and actually put the money behind the program. Like,
can I ask one question real quick, Ross, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
Let's say we are 8-3 heading into the NC State game. We beat NC State. We get to 9-3. We win a fluky bowl game against a team that isn't playing its top talent. 10-3, Mac Brown. You're sitting at 72 years old. Are you saying, hey, I've done what I need to do? I got an interest back in this football team. I got the 10 wins. I just beat our rival. Are you riding off into the sunset and saying, hey, I can help raise money for the athletic program, but I'm done as coach?
I think his ego, I think he loves it. I think he like needs it and wants it. And like, I think it's this thing with coaches, man, when they quit or retire, it's just like, that's all they know. And so I think he wants to do it for a while. I think it's tough because I think he thinks he's the best person for the job. And I think in many respects for a lot of parts of the job, he is. I just think some of the in-game coaching and maybe some of the recruiting now, he's not. I think you said a great line there, Mike, about treading water. I do feel like it's kind of where UNC is now. They had opportunities, like you said. Like they had the quarterback, but the defense wasn't there. They had the star quarterback. Defense wasn't there. Now, potentially, they might have the defense, might be a little bit above average.
It'll be funny when the defense is elite and the quarterback is not.
Yeah. We didn't talk about linebackers much. I don't think they're going to do anything with those linebackers. You got a broken hand on one, and both guys are under 6 feet. Anyway, man, this has been a great conversation. Anything to close out? I mean, I think we set the stage for a lot of good talks. I could talk Mac Brown, the future of UNC football, for a while. I think we got to get more undergrads, more graduating, more people, more in-state Charlotte and Raleigh kids who want to donate and be part of the Rams club and tailgate and be at games. We got to maybe maybe get more bros in who want to support football. I think that's a big thing. Like, you see these SEC schools are graduating huge classes. Their alumni bases are growing in UNC,
Yep.
Duke, Wake, Virginia, small alumni bases compared to Big Ten and SEC. And a lot of people aren't invested in football. So you're graduating a slim amount of students who are actually going to invest in the program. Some of the best fans didn't go to the school. Tons of guys. I mean, Julian, you kind of have a special situation because you have so many connections to the school. Some of the best fans are just North Carolina residents who are just grew up with UNC. I mean, the alumni base, the buy-in for football, that financial support is not there compared to like a South Carolina or a Tennessee or a Georgia. And that's if UNC wants to go to the SEC, which I think that's where I would want to go. And that's where I think most people would want them to go. Like, that's going to be a big wake-up call, but you got to kind of start moving that way in the mentality and the fundraising and the facilities and the fan support.
The enrollment.
I think fan support, enrollment, growth.
You bring up South Carolina, man. Like, imagine South Carolina only had 4 years of ever being any good in football. And that's because they had a generational class of talent there. In state with Stephon Gilmore and Kelsey Quarles and Jadeveon Clowney and Marcus Lattimore. That state doesn't have that much talent. North Carolina keeps growing. Imagine if this school had the investment there and the passion that university has, and they always suck. Imagine where North Carolina would be as a football program with that kind of investment and that kind of passion for a football program. I'll say that at the end, and we'll see. 8-4 season, would be great. But you look at the schedule, they're playing one good team. And that's about it. Maybe one or two because state I think can be pretty good. Yeah. So you got 2 ranked teams on your schedule preseason, and I'm confident only one of them for sure will be there at the end of the year. That is not a schedule in year 6 of a program that you should be looking at being oh yeah, we're gonna go 8-4. No, this should be a schedule where you're thinking to yourself, this Louisville last year, this is our chance to go out there and to maybe do something special. And it's unfortunate that's not the general tenor around the program heading into the season, which I think is a big problem.
Ross, I think just kind of closing thoughts from me. I think you bring in the biggest. My hottest take is that if Carolina really wants to compete in football moving forward, move to the Big Ten or SEC, they're going to have to increase their enrollment by a pretty significant margin. I think that is honestly key and very much overlooked at this point, and that's a really tough conversation to have, especially for an academically elite university like Carolina. If you give me 9-3 with a win over State, I'm a happy camper. If you give me 8-4 with a win over State, I'm probably saying, okay, hey, let's see what we can do. Maybe rejuvenate the recruiting in State a little bit. If we're 8-4, we lose to State, or 7-5 with a loss to State, or anything less than that, I'm pretty checked out. I'll still watch the games like a sicko, but I'm pretty depressed. So that's my take.
I'd love to win a bowl game. I feel like bowl games.
Don't care.
Yeah, but that is a win. That could make a 7-4.
If it's the difference between single digit wins and double digit wins, for sure. Let's do it. But
I still can't. It just sounds so scuzzy. I can't count those, man. It's a one-off where you don't even know what the motivation is going to be. You got a bunch of guys who are going to opt out. Hampton ain't playing the bowl game. You're going to have so many dudes. J.J. Jones might not play, which may be kind of insane thinking about that. Corey Gaynor didn't play in a bowl game last year. What's he doing now? He's coaching
at UNC.
Coaching.
Yeah,
exactly.
All right,
that's what you got.
We're getting a little off topic here. All right, guys. We appreciate y'all listening. This is the first episode. We had technical difficulties. We have echoes. My mic or headphones or something went askew. Hopefully, producer Connor can fix it up. So hopefully, it's a pretty good show. I think this is great content from Mike and Julian. We're gonna bring it. This hopefully will be a show with these 2 guys and me on once a week as our schedules align. Stick with us. We're going to get better. It's going to be smoother. Audio is going to be stronger. And as the season comes on, we're going to have more to talk about. I think we set the tone here with the last 30 minutes of kind of what type of stuff we can get into and talk to a little more free. I don't have to see Mac every Monday and every Wednesday. I don't have to kind of mix it up with players. I can be a little more free on what I talk about. I'm going to go to some press conferences, going to go to some games. And I know Mike and Julian will be locked in as well in Chapel Hill. Thanks for listening to the Big Hitters Only podcast. If you want to sponsor this, hey, reach out to me. Email is on my Twitter account. We're going to get some sponsors in here, get some money flowing in, and make this a really good show. It's going to be really fun, a chance for a lot of UNC fans to hop in and engage. Appreciate you, Mike. Appreciate you, Julian. And we'll talk to you next time.